te ariki atua te iehua kia tika anu rā taku whai atu ki a koe ki o toki e nei wā mea hau e titiro noa atu ana i noa ke atu ana i te nui o te whakangaro mia o meo tāngata o te aha, o te rawa, o te taputapu, o te whare, o ahara nei i a marangai, i a whā, i a tūpuhi, ki te pito, ki te marangai, ki a Gabrielle, ki a ia patu haere ki roto ki ngā rohe whenua o Tahumaakaakanuimatua puta atu ki roto anō i e rā ki te taira whiti au ka titai. E tahi anō, puta atu pēr me ki i te motu. Te Yahweh atua te iehua, ka tau mai anō ai ki roto ki a mātau. O ho whakaaroaro, nui whakaaroaro, hinengaro, e pātua nani i te nui o te whakangaro mia o wai, puta atu ki roto o te rāraro, puta atu ki roto tāmaki makaurau, puta atu ki roto waikato, ki e rā katoa no ngā wāhi patu haere ai haukerekere hia, ai e te āwhā te tūpuhi tū ai kerekere nei. Arara marangai Gabrielle me te tauwehinga atu anō e tahi. Me tō tata mātau tauwhanga atu tonu ki te kōrero ia e tahi o te 3,000 pēr kai te ngaro tonu. Te ariki atua, te iehua, kai te kite atu e mātau i te nui tonu o te kaha o e pērā tonu i te atuatanga, tēnei te kaha, te mana nei o Gabrielle e haukerekere haere nei i te tāngata, haukerekere haere nei i te aha. I te wao tū, puta atu ki tātahi, ki ngā takutai, haukerekere haere ai, HauPatuKarawa haere ai. Te tino mea te ariki atua i pākarawa atua no me te patu, kia mate, e tahi nui tonu, me tō tātou mātau i taku kōrero atu i tērā i nā tata tonu iho i mua nei, taku kōrero tonu atu i e rā mano kai te tauwhanga tonu rā e tātou mātau kia wa kōrero rā i a rātau. Pāpū rirawa mātau. Pāpū rirawa te kite atu, kai roto anō e tahi o ngā uri arara i te uri a kahungunu. Kai roto me o hona nui. Hoi anō te tino mate, kai roto katoa anō ngā uretārewa, ngā hapu uretārewa rā nei o Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Kai roto katoa anō i rā e waru i roto i te kahane o Gabrielle, ki te patu haere, te whakangarongaro haere i te āhuatanga kia mātau ingoa. Me tō mātau kaha māharahara tonu i a wai. Ahakoa rā tō mātau i mua tonu iho nei, tō mātau i mua tata, mānuka atu ki o mātau ake atu whānaunga anō hoki, kai roto o HeretaungaWairoa, puta atu ki roto te takapau, te hauke, ki roto anō hoki o ta whao, E rā wāhi katoa noa engari, te ariki atua, tō mātau tino pāpūritanga kai roto i te mea nei o te nui. Te rarahi rawa o te āhuatanga o te kahai whakangarongaro haerei a Gabrielle i nei i te wiki tuakene. Ka reira kia inoi tonu te inoi. Koina nā tā mātau ki roto tēnei wā kia inoi tonu te inoi tonu ake atu te inoi. Kia koe te ariki atu anō hoki taku inoi anō. Kia koe kia tau mai kutohu mana ki tanga tonu. No te mea rā hoki te tino rarahirawa o te nui whakaharahara o te patu haere, te hau kirekire haere o Gabrielle. Me te nui o te whakangaro mia o tā ngatangata. Ka hore tonu pea e tino tae ai. Te kōrero ake atu i te nui katoa ngā whakaaro. Te hinengaro whakaaro, te roro whakaaro mātau i roto i ni wā. Engari hai tōna wā pea mātau. Kōrero atu ai, whiwhiri ake atu tonu ai, te ariki atu i ni mea katoa. I roto tonu anō i tō houingoa. Te iehua. Me taku whakaaro ki atu i rā whakaaro. Taku mahara tonu i rā whakaaro. Me tō mātau pāpūri i aua whakaaro. No te mea rā hoki i mua tatatanu iho nei. Kai te hoki atu aku whakaaro ki tērā aku inoi i mua. Me taku kite atu i te kikino kai roto. Taku māharahara rawa i te mea nei nā te kikino tonu peake. E rā tuāhuatanga me te pito, te pū ki te kikinotanga kai roto pea. Ko ia hoki tērā haere atu ana. I roto tērā wā i te āwhātu tū ai kerekerera kai roto pū i te pito ki Gabrielle ia marangai haere ana mai. Hoi anō kua rereke ngā whakaaro i nā iana. Kua āhua rereke ngā whakaaro. Kai roto tonu nā hoki te kikino hoi kia mātau. Āhua rereke te tū āhuatanga nei. Karakau i te tikuna mai e kōkoe, kōkoe te ariki atua te iehua i te mate nei kia tino hau kerekere atua i ia mātau i o mātau tāngatangata. Puta atu ki roto Kahungunu'Uri, puta atu ki roto anō TeAitangaaPorourangi. I roto i te waiho tonu i te pū ki te kikino ki ai. E rā āhuatanga pā mai anō ai. Hoi anō, he wā anō tērā hai kōrero te ariki atua me taku inoi tonu i te inoi i a kōkoe. Kia tino tau mai i tō whakaaro, i o hou māharahara, i o hou mahara ki ngā tāngata i nā iana, i ngā hapori, ngā rohe whenua. Kua tino, kua whakangaro haere ai, kua paru tāuriuri katoa no te nuinga, te waipuke, tāpuke katoa no ai, te ariki atua, kia inoi ake tonu i a hau tōu, roha i a mātai putātu, Karakau i e nei rā, te ariki atua e tāia ake atua noai, e au. te ki ko mea uri tērā ki tērā taha tērā ko mea mai roto o mea hapu ne tārewa ke pea tonu iho anō tērā a ki tērā taha karakau. Whanaunga katoa mātau i roto i niwa me te aroha tonu pērā tonu. I te mea nei mehe mea pēnā ko te whānau, mehe mea ko te whānau e kōrero hia ki a tune. Kāroha hoki, kāroha hoki. Kāroha hoki e rā kua tino tau e heati. Kāroha atu e rā kua momotu ki tawhiti. Kāroha atu hoki e rā kua riro noa te atu ki roto ki pai rau. Ki te otinga atu ki te tānga tangata. Me rā tonu ki anō i kōrero ake atu anō ai, ki anō i kite atu ake atu anō ai. Kāroha. Pāpūri tonu hoki mātau i tērā katoa. Me te mōhio, kai roto ke anō i nā iene o mātau whanaunga, kai roto o HeretaungaWairoa epa, te ariki atua, kai roto katoa nō rātau. Te iehua, ia rātau anō i ngā tānga tangata, kai roto HeretaungaWairoa. Puta atu anō ki roto kei reira etahi o te whanaunga i te aitanga hauiti. O roto tūranga nui a kiwa e awhi atu ana i a wai, e tautoko atu ana i a wai. No te mea rā hoki rātau, ka tai a rātau, te ora. Mai anō ai i roto i a Gabrielle rā. Ana o raiti ke hoki rātau ōmaki, rere ōmaki ke rātau i te āhuatanga nei, i te haukerekerenga nei mai, i roto i ai te tūpuhi, i te āwhā, patu pērāra. Patu pērāra i te tāngata, patu pērāra i te toi oranga, patu pērāra i te oranga, patu pērāra i ngā huatanga katoa, ngā kai, ngā waotu, ngā hua, i te wenua, katoa anō kua tino. E no reira epa, te ariki atua, te iehua, ka tika kia inoi rā i a koe i nei, whakauauatanga kaimua ke tonu nei i a tātou mātau i roto i niwa. Me taku mōhio, tō mātau anō mōhio. O roto Tahumaakaakanuimatua e kore rawa e tae. Kia whakatikahia, kia pai haere, kia tēnā kia whanatu, kia haere, tēnā kia whakawhanake. Mai anō ai ki roto ki a tātou mātau. Ai, tērā katoa, tino kore ai, ki te kore rā hoki rā i a koe, i a kōkoe, kōkoe, te ariki atua. Me ohu mana ki tanga ohu tohu, o whakaaro nui, kai roto, tō wā roha i a tātou mātau. Kia au mai anō ai ki roto. Hoi anō ngā ahuatanga kia wai atuatanga pēr, kai roto. Koia nā huki e tahi o te ahuatanga kai roto i a mātau e whakaaro nui ana. Hoi anō. E mea ke anō tērā. Wā ke anō tērā hai kōrero tonu i a mātau. No reira kia wai hoke pēr i a hau. Engari kia mātau e atuatanga ke i roto te pai, i roto te māramatanga, i roto te ao, kai roto ke tonu i nei tū āhuatanga. Mōhio ke tonu rā tātou I te āhua ki a papahu hāu enuku I a rangi nui I te āhuatanga I a tāwhirinuku I a tāwhirirangi. Ko ia e rā tahi o te atuatuatanga e kōrero hia kenei e pā. Te ariki atia, kai roto katoa no I rā atuatuatanga tahi mea tahi wā o te taonga katuku mai tahi wā. Mea tonu I hora I a tātou mātau tahi wā kiki no hoki te āhuatanga ki ai. Arara ki te atuatuatanga tahi wā. Arara tērā. Ia Gabrielle kua puta mai. Kai roto ke pia anō I te kaha I te mō rea mai. I te tapu anō. I te nui anō o te kiki no anō. Meki, te kiki no anō. O te kaha hau kire mai. Ia tātai mātai I roto I nei wā, ko ia noa hau. Whakaho ki hoki mai anua I a hau ki roto ki te ino I tonu. Koa rā tērā mea te ino I kāre anō I mutu ai. Kāre anō I mutu ai. Kāre anō I tīni. Kāre anō I tīni. Engari ngā whakaaro. Ki te āhuatanga nei, ka āhua tīni. Ka āhua tīni mai tērā wā ka tīmataria te inoi, puta tiki roto anō hoki ki tēnei wā tonu nei e pā. I roto I tō uingoa, te iehua, te karaiti, hau inoi tonu ai. Me taku whai ati ki roto ki a mātau o Tahumaakaakanuimatua I tōhou roha kia tau tonu mai ai ki roto ki a tātou mātau. Tonu mai anō ai ki roto ki tēnā, o ngā whānau, ngā uri, ngā hapu, ureta rewa, waiiwi, wai rānei, no roto I nei tua huatanga katoa mātai, kua whānau katoa, kua whanaunga katoa, kua Aera hoki. Kai te runga no me te kite ake atu anō e ahau I te roi mata a tahi, te tangi tonu a tahi. Te mea tonu ke, pia ia hauna, I roto tēnei wā. Kia rānguna I koe e pā, te ariki atua I rā roi mata tanga mai, māringiringi tanga mai. Te taka mai anō te hupe, rā mea katoa, te mamai. Me tōho nā meki, Kameha katoa. Kameha katoa. Anō tērā... tēnei kai awai kua tonu ia te kupu. Kai awai ko ia. Kai whea ia ko ia te kupu. Hai whakāhua atu te āhuatanga ni. Kei a koe ke tonu pea. Ko koe, te ariki atua. Kei a koe, ko koe, tonu ke pea te kupu. Te kōrero. Engari anō, kene pea o mātau kōrero hai āpiti atu ki roto ki aua kōrero. Engari, kai te rānguna atu, I ngā atuatuatanga ki te taha ki te ao mārama I roto I nei wā e mātai. E no reira, kai roto I rā atuatuatanga I nei tua huatanga. Harai te mea ka pā mai I roto anō I te whakawākanga I te aha nei I te he o waira nei aha nei. Kai a rātau meki, ko tō rātau hia ki te mea, tuku o te mea, kai a rātau ke tonu ia te rā, kōrero hai kōrero, ko te tohu anō rātau tēnā. Karakau e tāe ana e tātou mātou e rā tū āhuatanga kia kokoti ai, kia kokoti. Hoi anō I noi tonu e au, e pā, te ariki atua, te iehua, I noi tonu. I noi tonu ake au, tēnei katoa, I runga I te whakaaro nui, kia e rā, e tangi ana. E rā I nā iana e ngaro ana, ngaro noatu. Kai te rā ngona tonu rā ia I te tiwe mai, o te kupu, o e rā. Kai te tangi tonu mai I o rātau ka nehu ai, ana. I roto I te tāpukitanga I te wai puke. O rātau pā I urunga ai, o rātau whewua ka nehu ai, nā e rā katoa. Kua mea nei, kōuretia mai. Kōuretia mai anu ai I roto ia papaha uanuku I ngā wāhi katoa I uru ai. O rātau ana, o rātau wāhi takoto. Kua raru katoa anu ai. Pāpūri tonu te ngā kau. Ia e rā ngā whānau, ia e rā. O waira ne kairata tūranga nui a kiwa taku mōhio, tīra. Mea I tōu wāroha ki roto ki a rātau kairira. Whakatauri anō hoki rātau, whakatauri anō hoki Heretaunga te Wairoa I roto I nei rā. Whakatikahia te titiro, e pā te ariki atua te iehua, ki roto ki ngā rā, kai mua tonu ake nei me te tika o te ara hai parau atu mā rātau katoa. Mātātau katoa. Ka tika hoki kia rite kē rā, ia mātau I ngā āhuatanga pēnā I te kouwiri. Te kouwiri rā nei, e rā ngā māwiwitanga ka pāma. Me tēnei nei. Tēnei mea mō rea nei. Te tikanga meri teke. Kari te whai tikanga kē tātau. Kari te whai take kē tātau. Kia uru atu ai ki ni tū āhuatanga. Katahi anō ka tī mata te whawhai. I te āhuatanga kairoto. Te tau tohe, te tau kai, te tau patu haere. Meri te ke tātai, ko ia nā ke hoki te tikanga, kia tātai mātou awhina mai, e pā, ia tātai mātou kia rite mai anō ai, kaiputa mai anō, taku mōhio, nā he kōrero anō ke tērā, kaputa mai anō. Kaputa mai anō, e tahi āhuatanga pērā tonu. Ki roto ki e rā wāhi tonu, kia te tūranga nui a kiwa ki roto tonu anō hoki ki Heretaunga te Wairoa, kāro hau ki rātau. E rā, kua mō rehu mai, ki roto ki e rā wāhi, ki e rā rohe whenu. Kāro hau ki, kai roto tonu ke anō, I ngā tū āhuatanga kia Waiiwi, kia Waiiwi, kia Waiuri, kia Waiiwi, kia Wai Hapu le tā le wara nei, kia Wai Hapu nui tonu le tā le wara nei. kāro hau. O te mea ki te ao pena hapu, e mea ke tonu iho anu, tira, katoa. E mea ke tonu ake huki anu, nā rira, aroha mai a mātai, e pā te ariki atua te iehua, aroha mai. Me tohu atu i te ara tika hai parau. Me taku mōhia, kua tika ke tā mātai, i roto te ao pena hapu, kua tika ke tā mātai. Tā mātai haere, engari ko te mea tonu e kōrero hia kenei, ea. Kai whea ke raho ki tātou ko ia, ki roto ki nei wā tonu nei. Koina nā tonu ia te mea e kōrero tia nei, ea. Ia wai iwi, ia wai uri. Ia wai whānau, ia wai aitanga. E pā te ariki atua, kai roto tonu anō tō hui ingoa, korohutu tō hui ingoa. Te tia rapa, meki te tia rapa, ki runga ki ngā tūa huatanga katoa. A kuara pē whea hoki te, pē whea kō ia hoki te hohonu, te roroa, te hane, o te rarahi rawa o te mea. Kārekau, o roto i tētahi mea, tētahi āhuatanga kaitua ke ia koe. Ia kōkoe, nā rira, e pā. Tā mātau e tūmanako nui nei. Ka tika ke ake, tō tātou mātau haere. I roto tēnei ao, engari karekau i te mea, i roto tēnei ao noiho. Ngai kai roto i ngā ao katoa, kia tika. Kia tika ke. Kia rite ke hoki tā mātau, tā tātau, ki o tō ākua pē whera. Ki roto mea ao. Me tika tō tātau haere, tika anō hoki tō tātau no. Me mea he ana whakatikahia. Koina nā tāhaku e mea nei. Hai aroha tonu taku kupu ati e nei kupu. Taku kōrero ati e nei kōrero. E te ariki atua, te iehua e pā. Me taku i noi tonu i e nei tū āhuatanga katoa a whinatia mai, tautoko hia mai, e pā. Ia mātau e whawhai haere nei ki roto. Ki e nā mea katoa. Whawhai haere nei kia tai, whawhai haere nei kia kite, whawhai haere nei kia mōhio mai anu ai ki te pai, kai roto. Ki te ako, kai roto. Ka tikara hoki ki nā iana, e pā, kia tika mai rā ke mātau. Tātou mātau, mātau katoa. Ka wai te mea ko kōkoe, engari. Mātau katoa, o roto te tānga tangata. Kia tika, kia rite, i nei tūāhuatanga katoa. Me te aha, me tō mātau, me tō mātau anō, whakatika ke tonu, kai pōhehe tonu rā ia e rā o mātau, kai roto tonu e noho atu ana, ake atu ana i te pōhehe. Ka hore kau i te tika mai, te takoto mai o Māori Wairua. O Waitahi, o roto ia tēnā, i tēnā. Koi ara hoki āhau, tā haku e ki nei, a inuai nei, mea tia e nei, tēnei katoa e pā. Koi e nei katoa no, e tahi o te mea ka whakatikahia mai rā e kōkoe, ki roto ki tēnei mea te tānga tangata, i e nei wā putati. koia tonu tā haku, he inuai. He whai tonu ai tō uāroha. Me taku ki te atu i tō uāroha i roto i ni tū āhuatanga. Kāre kore, kai roto tonu ia tērā katoa i tō mutupu haere. Ahakoa pōturi, ahakoa i roarawa tērā haere ka mutupu tonu. Ana ka tino koa taku ngā kau i tērā no te mea rahoki e rāngona ana i ngā mea, i ngā kōrero, i ngā pānuitanga, i ngā karerenga, i ngā kai waiwai kai te mea mai nei kia mātau. Epa, arara tērā, arara te ai. Kāroha huki. Aue. Ai, koira rā hoki tā mātai roto i rā wā i te kātoa anō hoki o auawa. Te kātoa anō hoki o auawa, aue, haere an. E mātai i roto i rā wā. E no reira awhi mai. Whakarahina mai anu ai tohu mai. Ia tātou mātou te tū ākana. Te ariki atua, ia tātou mātou ki nā iana, kia tika. Whakatikahia te tū, whakatikahia te no. Whakatikahia te āhuatanga ki te wairua. Nā, i roto i rā tū āhuatanga kai te mōhiohio rā e ahau i ngā ako o kuima o koroma, o kaumātuama, o pahake. I rā o ngā ako, ka tikahia katoa hia tērā, nā, kua rite ke i nei tū āhuatanga katoa kēna. Ka te pai? E pā, ka te pai? No reira, koia nana hoki tā haku e ki nei. Me taku kore anō o te ki, e atua tanga ke kāreka. Kai roto ke anō tēnei katoa i a kōkoe. Kai roto tonu anō i tō hoa mārama te tū ākana. E noho tonu ana tēnei taha kia mātai, tō mātai tikanga, tō mātau tāngatangata, tō mātau kirikiri, tō mātau tū ākiri, tō mātau e nohora wā ke atu tonu nei, i roto i niwa. E no reira nā hau ino e tonu nei a koe, i tō hou ingoa, te ariki atua te iehua, te ariki atua te iehua, te tiarapa, te ariki atua te iehua, te koroutū, ake tonu akera. Me taku i noi anō i a koe kia noho tonu mai anō ai ki roto ki a tātou mātou. Tohu haere mai anō ai ki a tātou mātou. I te rā haere, i te parau o te rā ara ki a tātou mātou. Ata whaitia hoki, te whakauaua o tēnā katoa kia tātou, kia mātou i roto i ai tahiwa. E tahi anō te tāngatangata o te hāpori, ka whakauaua mai. Ka mō rika mai anō ai tērā tū āhuatanga katoa, kia rātau. Reira, whakatau mai, ia kōkoe ki roto, ia kōkoe, ana. Whakau, i tō ukaha, i tō hou mana, i tō utapu, i tō hou koroutū, ki roto ki tēnā katoa. Pāru he haere mai anō ai, ia tātou mātai ki roto ki ēnā tū āhuatanga katoa. Ko ia nā hoki taku mō hio e pā, ki ēnā tū āhuatanga. Te whakatikahia mai rā te tā ki te wairua. Nā, kua tino rite koe, kua tino rite ia wai. Te kātoa o ēnei tū āhuatanga pēnei nei. Ngā mea katoa heuru tā nei, ngā mea mōreara nei, pēnei tēnei nei. Te marangai Kameha mea pēnā nei. Ia Gabrielle nei. E nei mea katoa. Koe nana hoki tā haku. Hai noi. Ka tino ki te mai anoa i te tūpū o tēnei katoa. O i nei kōrero a kui mā koroma. A kau mātua. A pahake. I te tika mai i a tērā hoki. I a tērā hoki. A rā i te taha ki te wairua. He hara. No te mea rā. He hara wara. No te mea rā hoki. E pā. Kai roto ia i tērā katoa. Hei tā rātau. Hei tā rātau. Te tino ritenga mai ki te aha. Ki te mea. Ki ngā tūāhua takatoa. Kai roto te toi oranga. Ora ke mai anō waira tātou mātau te tāngatangata i rā tūāhuatanga. Pēnā tonu ia me te mea. Ko tō hou ora tonu ati, pū mau tonu te ora i roto tonu anō ia kōkoe. Kai roto tonu ia tērā katoa o te tūāhuatanga i tērā mea o te whakaura mai rā i te taha ki te wairua kia wai. A koe nā hoki aku whakaaro ki roto tēnei wā, me taku i noi tonu e pā, te ariki atua, te iehua, i noi tonu ia. Ai a wai. Ia wai tamaiti, ia wai ko ngahu ia wai pakeke, tai pakeke, kui a koroua. Wahine, wai. Kia ino e tonu ke i te ora kia rātau. Me taku mōhio tonu i ngā kōrero anō ia rātau i ngā kaumātua, i ngā kuia, i ngā koroua. Tai ai e kōkō koe. Tai ai e kōkō koe. I tō hou ingoa tapu, i tō hou ingoa tirapa, te pou hoko, te pou hiri, te pou whakaura, te ariki atua te iehua, te karaiti, mene kāpiti hono. Ka tātai hono, ko rātau mātonu ia tērā, pitati kia rātau, ka tai anō rātau, ka tau e he haere nei. Tēnā pitati haere, whanati, ka haere koutou, ka tau e he atu koutou. Pāpūri rawa te ngā kau, kua kiki kē rawani. E tō tātou mātou matua nui te rangi. Ia koutou koutou nā wā ki tēnei wā tonu nei. Pāpūri rawa iau. Aue rā i te aue. O koutou whānau, o koutou uri, o koutou hapu, o koutou retārewa. I rā katoa. Me te tangi whakaroto kia koutou. Ko koutou whānau ka waiho noa ke atu nei ki roto ki te ao, ki te kāno hio ratu. Pāpūri tonu hoki, pāpūri kāroha hoki koutou. Engari rā haere. Haere raki te pō whakauti atu. Haere rā ki tua ki pae rau. Ki tua ake ki tā wau o te pae. Te pae o mahara, te pae o whakaaro. karere whakauti. Ka piti hono ka tātai hono, ka tātou mātonu ia tēnei tātou, te kānuhi ora. Pai te mihi atu. Tēnā nau mai, tēnā haramai. Tēnā nau mai haere, piki, kake, haramai, ki roto ki ngā kōrero, ngānui, miki, koia naho ki te kōrero a te nuinga, ngānui, me kupu kōrero whakahiraira, whiriwhiringa, pai, kia tātou mātou, miki, toha haere ai, kia tātou mātou, whiwhi haere ai, ki mua ki te aroaro kia tātou mātou, kai te mihi atu. Tēnā haramai, tēnā naumai haere, piki, kake, haramai. Tēnā rā tātou, mauri ora. Kahuri. Kia ora mai rā tātou. Aroha mai, aroha roa ki te ahua ki tērā. Ahakua taku I noi I te nui. You know, I did a number of huhua mai anō ai rā. Taku I noi roto tēnei wā. A number of prayers I said there. Obviously for all of those of the survivors of Gabrielle, our MarangaiKameha. You know, and the devastation, you know, who has got the words, you know, who does have the words to describe the impacts. We just hope and pray, and we keep on praying. We pray right through the whole thing, you know. And I remember back to my first words that came to my mind and that came upon my heart was to directly speak to Gabrielle and say, hey, mutupu, you know, appease. Lord, appease Gabrielle, you know. And I turned to the Lord and prayed there. Say what? Just dropped my notes here. But, and I asked, please, you know, as well, talk to Gabrielle, to the nucleus, you know. And, you know, order Gabrielle to appease. And even if Gabrielle was already set to devastate where Gabrielle was going to devastate, I still prayed against that. We still prayed against it, and we prayed right through for that, you know, what a marangai, huge devastation right across the Moteo. It's being felt, and you know, there's impact right across. But some of the remains and the survivors, you got to feel, you know, aroha for them, and you gotta, you know, all our prayers to all of them. And you know, we definitely ask of the Lord now to bring us to the point of where we need to be now, and that's thinking about, you know, preparing for that ever happening again. Because what I'm starting to dislike about the pattern that's forming here, and I was praying that to the Lord just before, about the pattern emerging here, and that is that how unready we are for anything and everything. And then once everything happens, you know, just like COVID, I was talking about COVID also just before, when COVID happened, you know, it took everyone by surprise. Well, it shouldn't be that way. You know, we should be ready for these disastrous things, you know, that happen. Ngā mea ohorere tonu ne, ngā mea upoko taua, you know. ngā mea upoko taua, nā, rokohanga tonua ke ati, rokohanga noa ati. You know? All of a sudden, you know, these sorts of things come upon us. Well, we should already be ready. We should be ready for those things. One of the things that I shared also in my prayer with the Lord is one of the most powerful learnings of my kuia and koroua and kaumātua and pahake have been that one of the ways of preparing for times like that is to prepare the wairua, you know, whakatikahia mai ngā āhuatanga katoa o te tiu, o te noho o tāanga tangata. You know, there's no greater way to be prepared for things like this and to be able to know exactly what to do and to be prepared physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually for things like this. That's how our tupuna survived. So many things like this, our tupuna survived those things. Why? Because they were already ready. Very, very ready for things like that. Okay, they lost people too, but, you know, hugely advantageous were a lot of the ways that our tupuna mātua used to do things. And they were always ready for disastrous consequences. You know, they never took anything for granted like we do today. We take too much for granted today. Let us not wait, like I said in my prayer, let us not wait, Lord Jesus, until the next one happens. And then we all get together, we're all bickering over, you know, all these different take about what's happening. We're all bickering about the government, you know, putting up, you know, all these sorts of things, and we're all protesting, blah, blah, blah. Let's forget about that and already be ready for it when it comes. All those things shouldn't have happened. You know, very easy for us to argue about all these things once things happen, you know. But we should already be prepared. Now, our tupuna mātua, our kuia koroua, our kaumātua and pahake, we're always ready for these sorts of things. Not that the devastation, you know, means that you know, all of the damage done is highly because of, you know, highly our fault, etc., etc. I mean, most of us were pretty unsure. We saw the size of this thing, te MarangaiKameha, but we were pretty unsure of the direction it was going to take. And lo and behold, you know, it hits the north and it hits the east real hard of the North Island. You know, that's the HeTohutira. And so, but I, yeah, as I said in my prayer to the Lord, you know, it's not something I want to go into. These are some of the things we've spoken about and we've discussed around the particular dangers that have happened. It's not the time nor the place. So we want to leave that and just focus on what's ahead. And we've got to do the right thing from here, though. See? Kuia nā te mea hai parāti mā tātai mātai. Te tika o te haere. Te tika o te ara I rā mea katoa. So I thought I'd add a bit of that to start off our kōrero and a little bit of background on what I was praying about. It's, yeah, directly for all those of the survivors and those who have gone, you know. And we don't know of the 3,000 that they're still trying to make out, you know, how many others there are gone that we don't know about. So, and I spoke about that too. You know, hopefully the Lord's got all of that, all in his control as well. And we learned that through the Lord's word. You know, the Lord, this is the Lord's honest word. Honest down to the ground. You know, he's the most honest. Ko ia hoki te pono, you know. Ko ia hoki te āhuatanga o te tika, kai roto katoa I ai. Tēnā mea te korau tū, no roto anō I ai. You know, so We've got to understand and know those sorts of things, that in the Lord is all those sorts of tau. And so we can believe te kupu a te atia, you know, te ronomi. O te kupu a te atia, you know, e rā mea katoa e pā atia nani I te kupu a te atia, you know, and I'm not going to go on too much further or sharing too much of those things, and just because I'm learning a lot about these things within my Christian faith, but these are things I wasn't wide open to, my eyes weren't open to before, not properly. I was too comfortable in my faith before, and that's why I think part of the reason I think the Lord guided me into this faith, which keeps me on my toes. I think it's just the cultural setting and the way of my old faith. But I dare say it has been a journey already, and not one that is without its challenges either, but one that tends to be, every challenge I tend to be overcoming, or more, better to say, better said, me ki, kia ki a ke tia. The Lord is overcoming all these obstacles for me. And so that's why I'm enjoying sharing those sorts of things. I'm not skiting, as they say. Some people are like that, pāki waha, ke huki rātau, and I'm not that sort of person. I do not skite. It's not a part of my nature. It's not a characteristic or a trait of mine. But I love to share, and I've always been a repository of sorts, so I've always loved to share. On the other hand, though, I always love to hold back, because sometimes, it pays to hold back on something. So a lot of that kōrero of ours, and actually we may not even share, but those are just, maybe I've said enough of that kōrero already. And that might be more helpful for people at this time. Well, we definitely, what I can say in the industry at the moment, we definitely are not looking at people as that whānau over there on that side, or that uri over there on that side, or that iwi over there on that side. Today, and over the past week, we have been all whānau, all hapu le tārewa, all uri, all whanaunga, and all in together. So, and that's really, I think, what the Lord is saying to us. That's what the Lord has put on my heart at the moment to share. And that we all got to come together and help each other through this sort of thing. But then, it still pays to be ready for these things. Let's not make no bones about that. Be ready for the next one. Be ready for the next COVID, or whatever is coming, Just be ready for it and take no chances, make no bones that things to come are going to be challenging sometimes, just like this one. And look at the devastation. You've got to feel aroha for these people. You've got to feel aroha. And I'm sure even without me praying that to the Lord was already aroha. I'm just trying to say, well, look, Lord, and and there's lots of other devastation going on throughout the world. You hear about Turkey, you still hear about Ukraine, all that sort of thing. the prayers don't stop for those people either. And that's what it's all about, being a Christian. But the Lord's word and the Lord's promise does not fail. It does not fail. I've already learnt that. Although I've only been Christian about only going on 5 years, but yeah, I already knew things like that. But I knew them differently to what I know now. Very differently to what I know now. So, always glad to share those sorts of things with you when I can. Just, all our condolences, all our aroha and prayers going out to everybody out there suffering through this crisis. Yet another, we were hardly ready for. But then, mind you, lots of lives have been saved, eh? So, yeah, perhaps, on the other hand, we were more ready for this one. But then, if you have a good look at it, we've still, if the 3,000 that are missing are not accounted for, what are we going to say? To me, there's still a lot of loss. There's a huge loss. 1 or 2 was a huge enough loss. And because they're all in the one or 2 regions mainly, Karoha. Karoha hoki nā tai, and I make no apologies in the industry, in Hapu development. The things that we're doing are not a part of anything to do with this sort of, what's going on here. And we know for a fact that what we've done is correct. It's accurate. It's exactly what we should do in the space. And as an iwi, pre-1769, as an iwi, we would have done the same thing. So here we are in 2023, and we've still got, as you well know, our Whakatapu and the investigation going, etc., which seems harsh on these people now that the devastating Gabrielle has passed over. But, well, we still say, just like I was saying in my prayer to the Lord, we still say, we've done the right thing. We're still quite happy with what we've done. Even though, Kahungunu'Uri ia mātou. Yawe, tonu. At the devastation and these poor people, He tohu tērā. No te mea rahoki, ko iei nei katoa tonu i nei te nuinga o rātau, te whānuitanga. Ko rātau i rā, kai tērā taha kia mātou. Aro nui mai anu ai, te kānuhi ki te mai ki o tātou mātou. Rātau. Kia tātou mātou o Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Hoi anō kāroha hoki. Okay, let me get into our update. Aroha mai, yeah, quite lengthy that one, eh? But then I think most people's, when they're talking about the devastation that's just passed through, most people's are quite lengthy, eh? So I make no apologies for that really, but te tōroa ke o ngā kōne kārakauau I te tino tāngata tino whai atu I tērā. But sometimes when sometimes things are needing to be long, I'm also that sort of person as well. So, there's, but then the only thing with that is that sometimes you're with groups that only want really short things, which is a hard case, because then what they don't know is that they're groups that don't appreciate the right times for, te āhua, te roa ki ake ati o ngā kōre. Yeah, that's all. But many prayers were there to have today. Just all those feelings, emotions, and the thoughts that the Lord put on my heart for today for all those affected by the devastation. So update time. We're still, in fact, not long after this kōrero, I will have contact again with the Crown. But we are seriously in wait, and we have to be close. We have to be close for our settlement, for our deal. It's the deal. For us, like the deal of the century, and that's what we await. We are unclear of what's happening with Kahungu. We do have some kōrero, but like everything, we are awaiting confirmation of a lot of that kōrero. The people that we speak with cannot confirm sometimes some of the kōrero that we want. There is some kōrero that we may settle independently, and this is why we don't sort of know what's happening with Kahungu. Are they still in? Or like they indicated at the end of last year, have they sort of pulled out? And are we the only ones left in there in this particular round? That's the sort of kōrero that's going on at the moment. We still haven't had a chance to have those talks with the Crown. But we are thinking that, and because most of the space and the settlement space and the Pena Hapu space, the ao Pena Hapu, most of the space is thinking that, and they are of the understanding that it's not too far away. We sort of are carrying on with work as usual. Yeah, that's how we're looking at it. But at the same time, we're still very, very keen and very, very positive that we will get to settle, and are still very, very keen about settlement, and are looking forward to that. And whatever form it might, whatever form it might come in, we're ready for that, anything and everything. The other thing is the lands part of our settlement. We have asked for the entirety of Waitarapikitara Te Matau a Maui to be returned back in our hands. We are fairly positive of how much of that we can expect, and including within Tararua, a lot of our lands up there. We know to the south Wairarapa and within Wairarapa, of much of our lands we can expect to be returned, but then there's a lot we can expect also not to be returned, which is sad. It's sad to us, and that doesn't mean to say what we're going to do is settle that right there and just accept it, because that's not what we're about to do. Well, one iwi, that when we know that these are our taonga tuku iho, we will fight you tooth and nail for those taonga tuku iho. And so the Crown needn't think that the Crown is going to leave it there and that's it, because we've got plans to get all our land back, and we will get that. That's all I have to say on that. But yeah, again, it can't be too far away. That's the thing about it. So we're going to carry on now. We're like business as usual, and carry on. I've taken on more work, etc. And the work's going to get more and more as settlement does come in. Workloads in terms of workloads, are just going to get enormous, from then on, and that'll carry on for a number of years. So, but things will eventually settle down there. But I'm really grateful that we're at this point, and that we are coming close to the settlement time. mind you, we haven't spoken with Kahungu. I may do at some point, but then again, we've been focused on the Crown, just as the Kahungu left us with at the end of last year. That apparently we had to go back and have talks with the Crown, talking through the settlement time to come, and ensuring and making sure that we, like we asked for, we entered into this round as independent as we are now. I mean, let's not forget they've allowed us there, whereas before we couldn't have that, remember that? And we've fought for that. So now that we've got our independence, we are so happy. But then at the end of last year, we didn't want to settle at another time. We wanted to settle in the same settlement space, which, we're entitled to. So, and that's what we had decided to do. We considered and had decided to do, and so we're just waiting around talks, moving on into that, and then the actual time and place for the settlement deals to be negotiated and to take place. We know that whatever form and structure that takes, or they take, the lands and the compensation part of the deal, that we will be ready to negotiate the entirety. Okay? We are not that silly. We are not that silly. We know what we should expect, and we've dealt with the Crown now long enough to understand how the Crown works. The problem is we don't think the Crown quite understands how we work. We work tūturu, and we work tūturu Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And we're hoping that eventually as time goes on, they'll get used to what that is. And there's no compromises in Tahumaakaakanuimatua. If they're looking for compromise, they'll get nothing like that. Okay? And this is why, we've become independent. Why? Because we don't compromise nothing. Nothing tūturu gets compromised by Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Like it or leave it. Or what I used to say, lump it, Like it or not. Like it or not. Koia nana ki hoki tā mātai. We as the mana wenua, the people of this land, and still rightfully the law of this land. How we do things is how we do things. If you don't like it, then cruise. You're more than welcome to pick yourself up and cruise out of here, out of our land. Because how we do things here is how we do things, and that's it. That's including the Crown. We're talking to the Crown as well. We make no bones about our way. This is our way. This is law. This is legal. Okay, and we've got a few things to talk about around those sorts of areas of life. In general, the legalities of things, the legal of things. Some of those sorts of issues will come up within talks around Te Tiriti 1840. That's part of the talks today. The amended statement of claim, which runs into that. And of course, Maihi 2023. Remember me talking about that last week? Also, I've got a note here on the Te Arawa. I remember mentioning the Te Arawa last week. And I had forgotten to mention on the Waitaha Tūrauta and Waitaha Nui. The Waitaha Nui that come from them is a particular branch of Waitaha Nui. Yeah. We are wondering whether they are the ones that come through the Waitaha Tūrauta up there in Te Arawa. Okay, or around their areas, close to the two wharetoa north there. Okay, so we are wondering whether they are the same people, but we're talking their branch of Waitaha Nui. They have all that kōrero down south there. their waka of Waitaha Nui. Well, we think they are particularly related to Waitaha Ahei and Waitaha Tūnauta. Okay? And we think those are their main tupuna. But that is a particular line. Our Waitaha Nui is in particular the senior line. So their line has to be the junior line. And they've got all that kōrero down there. I think it's Rangihoia? Yeah. They have all their waka and that they talk about down there. But they're in particular, they're the junior line. Okay? Now, so we and of course we have connections in there, Waitaha Nui, through Waitaha Ariki, and also through Māmoe. Hapu Nui Tonu Ureta Warane. Okay, and so we have all that to talk on today. I'm gonna try and work through it as quickly as I can today. If we go a bit long, aroha mai, but I really would like to get through all of this kōrero today because, and the reason we're going to talk about their tiriti 1840 today is because we need to, there needed to be more clarification. Aroha mai people wanted more clarification as to the actual fraudulent status of the fraud. And to give a lot more detail in depth on the fraud if I could. And I can. Yeah, I've got lots of information on there that I haven't shared yet. I didn't share it last year in the programs I did on Whakaputanga 1835 and also the TDT 1840. I've got a lot of that here today. A lot of the proof, a lot of the evidence. I've quoted Claudia Orange and all of them last year, all their the videos, the works of Anne Kaimatua Pahake, mai roto te tai rāwhiti, Pākehane, i tupu mai anō ai ki roto te tai rāwhiti. Salmon, yeah, that's her name. A lot of her works, I've quoted all that before. Now we turn to the courts, some of the writings of the courts, but one in particular that I quite like. There's a few things I don't like about this particular rauimi, this particular source. Puna kōrero, e tahi anō tūāhuatanga o te mātā puna kōrero. Nei, from the courts and also from the Waitangi Tribunal. Some things I don't like their references to civil government. Civil government is questionable in terms of their idea of what civil government is. And even back in 1840, civil government, the New Zealand Crown had no idea what there was. So we would argue that the civil government that they talk about in this source is actually, they were still hard out feudalists. They were still hard out feudalists, and it shows. It shows. So when they talk about civil government, aroha mai, if I bring that up and I accidentally say civil government, if I do that sometimes, look, they had no idea in those days what civil government was, and in fact we had civil government already running here. Okay, the problem, they wanted the whole of the land under their authority. They knew how to get it, and that was by fraud. And also they, and so that's the way they took it. Have I got some proof? Yes, I have. Now, what I'm going to try and do is summarize that evidence So that, because it might go, my kōrero today might go way too long if I go through all the evidence. There's lots of it, lots of kōrero, but I want to particular, just to shorten things, talk about that particular source, and it's a guide to the principles. They even talk about the principles. Aroha mai if I talk about the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, because kia mātou e rā tūāhuatanga principle no te karauna nui ho nei. No te karauna, no te kāwanatanga nui ho. No te taha no tonu kia rātau. You know, the principles were sort of formulated by, the Crown formulated. They don't consider the super tribes' understanding of the Treaty of Waitangi and the simple fact that we focus directly on the articles and not these so-called principles that even the legal fraternity or the Waitangi Tribunal refer to the treaty as a bunch of principles. It's a crock, kia mātai. Hamutike, kia mātai, tira. And so the treaty is about the articles. I mean, let's talk about that directly. Let's not go diverging off into some principles formulated out of understandings of the New Zealand Crown and the Waitangi Tribunal, Let's not diverge off into that. And that's what the principles are formulated out of. They don't actually really exist within the treaty. The articles do. And so that's, but however, this is such a good source because a lot of the information that it provides is quite in depth and quite detailed. And so when I go through that, when we get to that, I'll try to scores and scores of it I've put together for today, but obviously, we're going to run out of time a bit in terms of trying to make this one a 2-hour one. But I certainly don't want to go, if I do go over that time, I certainly don't want to go too much over. Okay, so hopefully I can close it off at around about 2.5 hours. Because last year we went on for 3 hours, 4 hours sometimes, and going on 5 hours, and that's getting a bit long. And so, but e tatama, just mentioning the te arawa there, and trying to make sure that I've spoken there a wee bit more, given there a wee bit more clarity about the tūpuna and the hapu uretārewa of Waitaha Nui, and hapu uretārewa of Waitaha Nui, and Waitaha Tūrauta, from out of particularly associated with Te Arawa, and Waitaha Ahe, that particular tūpuna, Waitaha Ahe. So a lot of the Pākehā writers, those authors that followed the Crown authors over the times, 1850s and 60s onwards into the 1890s and onwards, all those sorts of writers, they merely followed, their kōrero, the initial kōrero out of the land called Era. Actually, what they gave us was a hand to understand the grand narrative. That's all they did, and that's what establishes the grand narrative. Is all those early writers that wrote around kōrero around the land court era, the treaty, and what happened after the treaty. Like, for instance, the land deeds era, You know, and that's where a lot of our tūākana were taken out of the picture. Through the land deeds, they were, in particular, more fraudulent documentation that was utilised, you know, so immediately after the treaty we had more fraudulence, where the land deeds were fraudulated as well. We've got plenty of examples of that in Wairarapa ki Tararua te Mataua Māori, where all the lands here were fraudulated under Kahungunu'Uri tāne. Why? Because they were the only tribes that would make deals with them or talk lands or accessibility to lands, blah, blah, blah. Okay? What they ended up doing is selling everyone's land. That's what stinks about that whole deal. But then again, if you didn't want to be a part of that, if you didn't want to be a part of the tiriti either, you didn't have a choice. You still lost your land. Seniorities in particular refused. You know, we all refused. Tahumaakaakanuimatua refused, hands down. There's no way we'd have anything to do with it. There was no way we'd sign te tiriti on behalf of Tahumaakaakanuimatua. No way. No way. And if you ask me, our tūpuna, I mean, I've studied te tiriti long enough to know, and enough to know that our tūpuna never signed that deal because they knew it was a rip-off. They knew. Right at the outset, they knew. Okay? There was a lot untoward going on there. Okay, so we've got in the amended statement of claim. I just want to make it clear. Some people have asked, you know, was it Lake Wānaka, you know, I was talking about, and is Pukaki in with all those claims, etc. Yeah, right through the west, out as far as the areas that I spoke about. From Murihiku to Te Anau, to Piopiotahi, to Tamatea. You know, we're talking Wānaka, you know, we're talking all those land areas, Manapouri, Ohau. Where's my notes on all of that? I'll just grab those. My notes on all of that is all here. Oh, that's not the one. It's the other one. E tatauma. Yeah, so all of our West Coast, South Island claims, and that will come under settlement at some point in time. Yeah, all those areas, including Manapouri, Pukakis in there, Aorangi, yes, and Greymouth is in there, Mawhera, I mentioned. Okuru, Okarito, te tūtai o te raki whanua. All those areas, right through there. Moturau, te tai o Poutini, right through. And up into te Punakaiki, Tauranga. Those areas, Tauranga River, we're talking about around there. That area of Tauranga, Punakaiki. And yeah, other questions that were asked, you know, why is an original line ancestry descent not one that we would move in on? The only reason we wouldn't move in on lands into that is because more likely our tūpuna are not in those lands. Why? Because we haven't intermarried largely. Okay, so in those particular lines of ancestry, original ancestry line descent, we haven't intermarried them largely. So they still, yeah, the original ancestries of those people of those lands still hold those lands. And let's not forget, right throughout all these lands that we've claimed and we will look to settle on, are lands that we overwhelmingly, in times pre the Crown, pre-1769, we held possession of. Okay, that's putting it in words. We had possession of that. I hate talking ownership because that's really a Pākehā concept and a Crown concept. Ownership, a commodity. Land as a commodity. Kia mātou. It's a living entity to us. It's a living entity. And these are other things. It's quite a mixed bag. The source on TeTiriti 1840. Because on the one hand it mentions like principles of the treaty, and it talks about civil government and the Crown wanting to set up civil governments, in the land, fancy that. The Crown wanting to set up civil government in the land because the Crown didn't know what that was. So then we get to 1854 and we're talking the New Zealand Crown. A little time after the treaty was signed, hello, next minute the New Zealand Crown of New South Wales, out of New South Wales, takes up the reins and they diss Westminster. They dump them. And you know what? We didn't have a say in that. And our tūpuna mātua would have been highly disgusted at that. And this Rauemi mentions that. A guide to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. So it's just some of those little special items, of detail in this particular writing that caught our eye, that I thought I'd share much from it with you today. Well, I'll break down a lot of it with you today. Okay, so let's that's enough on the amended statement of claim. But added to that is te reo, and that's what brings us to te tiriti. Okay, added to that is te reo. We've got added to our lands down the west, remember that? We had to name and cover all the lands that we claim into in the South Island's west coast, te tai o Poitini, and also add the reo as a claim. They utilised our reo to fraudulate our tūpuna mātua right across the country. Lastly, they were fraudulent, and we need to prove that sort of thing. Well, I'm going to add to my kōrero some of the proof of that today. If you look on our ariki page, my ariki page, you will see the proof, written in the articles, written in our research, and also written in the translations there. I'm going to do a little bit of comparison of that today, and the translations, concentration and focus of this particular rauemi on the Māori text and the English text. What this rauemi also tells us, what this source also tells us, is that the original English text was lost. Isn't that convenient, eh? The original English text. And you know why I say that? Because in our research, we had already decided before we even came across this taonga. This is a real taonga, this source. But we didn't get it until a couple of years later after our research. We got this source. And, wow, we sat down and we went through it because, it caught our eye, some of us, and then it caught the rest of our eye. So we needed to go through this source. And the reason for that is because it covered all the other detail as well that we came out with and reinforced it. And this is the first of the first major source that we've come about that actually does that from a court's point of view and from the Waitangi Tribunal point of view. It also mentions contra preferentum, and that's another side of our amended statement of claim that's being added. That contra preferentum, it took them 2 centuries. Okay, that's a claim. Way too slow. Way too slow. This Westminster system, I'm always moaning about that. And its idea of democracy, way too slow. Way too slow. These powers that be in this country, alongside us, the chiefs and the people of this country, of the super tribes of this country, they need to get some more smarts in there, because actually they're way too slow to meet the demands of the people. And that's how we know that our way of looking at things is far better. Our idea of civil government is far better as well. Okay, Te Runanga ko Huiarau and the Confederation of Chiefs, etc. Everything, the whole of the system and process and structures and form of our governance system is going to need to update. I mean, any governance system from way back then up until 1947, from 1816 to 1947 needs updating, obviously. But it was last updated with Westminster. I mean, we're talking King William IV. 1835, it was King William VI in charge. He was the one that the declaration was written on, written to, asking for the support of the Declaration of Independence, etc. Well, look, these are the parts of the amended statement of claim that run into this particular topic on Te Tiriti 1840. And so we have some great items of detail in there, based around Hobson, based around Busby, based around a lot of their organisation, what they were truly looking for, what they were aiming for. What it doesn't do is cover how they did it. We come in with that because we know how they did it. And we understand the movements that they made, the manoeuvres that they took in order to achieve the fraudulence that they did. Because that's the only way they could achieve that, what they wanted. They were particularly asked by Lord Normanby. He was the Secretary of State, to get sovereign authority of the Queen across the country, and do it, in the most civil way. And of course, we know for sure now, and a lot of the detail here actually reinforces what we know. And so that's good. That's good news. And so we'll get to share about that. Contra preferentum. Far too slow to apply that. All good that it's applied now, but we've had 2 centuries of non-use of it. Easy for the Crown to say that their current claims settlement system covers everything. We don't think so. We don't think so. We think it seriously misses the mark, and it seriously misses the point. Okay? Aroha mai. Now that brings me to the point that, and that would be the final issue that we have to add to the amended statement of claim before we put that through to the tribunal as well. Okay, and the Crown can't say that the current claims settlement system covers everything, because there's some monstrous gaps. In fact, there's between 97% and 99% worth of gaps in there. Okay, let's not forget we're only getting settled for 1%, between 1% and 3% of what we are entitled to, and from throughout our claims, and that is illegal. What the Crown is saying is their powers of sanction and their little authoritarian dictatorship. See, and this is some of the stuff I went on about last week. And people did question that. They were saying, where does all these trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars worth owing on all these impacts coming from? Well, that's where it comes from. The simple fact that the Crown has not paid its full debt. Okay, that's one thing. And then whilst we've been going through all these claims, etc., 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 more and more items of claim have come up for most of our people. Most of our land has not been returned. Okay? That doesn't mean to say, as the rightful possessors and stewards of those lands, that we should give up there and say, oh, no, you have it, Mr. Crown. No. Nah. That's not where Tahumaakaakanuimatua compromises. Sorry about that, but we compromise nothing in Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Okay? If the Crown still holds on to our land, you can bet that Tahumaakaakanuimatua will be back to get those lands and retrieve them for our mokopuna and our mokopuna's mokopuna and their mokopuna, etc., etc., etc. Because we gave no permission for the Crown to touch 1 ounce, 1 inch of our land. Do you understand that? We gave you no consent to any of it. Nor your governance. We gave you no consent to that. Nor your assumed sovereignty or authority. We gave you no consent to that. No authoritarian dictatorship assumed did we give you or consent to. Okay? And so, to set the record straight, we are still aiming to take the Crown to court on these matters. And lo and behold, we've already had some people say to us, we might not have to. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that. It would be good if we didn't have to, but at the moment we want the truth. We want the facts put before the public eye, because at some point the public has to come into all this stuff. People have to have their say. That's a true democracy, right? But, within our structures of governance, we go way beyond a democracy. Let me reinforce that right here. And we are way beyond a democracy. Why? Because governance to us is not just, what's that word? It's not just about redemption. It's not just about recovering. Recovering the sufferings, helping people, compensating the people for their suffering. It's not just about that. Governance is about making sure the people have what they need and providing that. Putting all the people on the front foot and making sure that they can have what they can have. We still put everything through the rigorous debating, They've got to get through all the chiefs, the taiopuru. They've got to get through all of the governing bodies there to represent Westminster, the Crown and the government of the country. Well, the governing party that's in at that time that we set up. Now, so those are the areas that bring us to the treaty. Why? Because we want to reinforce, and that's what people have asked us to do, reinforce the kōrero around the trillions and trillions, and that's why we say, you know, everything's been done so far over the last 2 centuries, right up to today, without contra preferentum being recognised. Okay? Also, we've only had, between 1 and 3% recovery. Okay? If the Crown thinks we're going to settle and not want the other 97%, they're wrong about that. They're wrong about that. That is not a legal settlement. And when you take away their authoritarian dictatorship and you take away their ability to assume sovereignty because of the proven fraud via Te Tiriti to acquire all of that, that's where a lot more of the trillions come from. Because they have governed over us in this country in such a way that it has subordinated us. Okay? And has subjected us to all of the oppression and the abuse and the suffering and the grievances that we've had to put up through since 1840, since 1840 in this country, our own country. How disgusting. And they talk about civil government in this taonga, in this rauimi. I like to question the writers of this. You know, do they really know what civil government was? That's impossible, you know, according to our evidence. That's impossible. Okay? And so, yeah, we definitely claim that the Crown utilised our reo to fool people into definitely signing Te Tiriti and also signing it, you know, with numbers. And that's what they wanted. And there was only one way to do that, and that was fraudulently. And they had that all worked out. And why I mentioned the English text just before, because remember how I've shared with you, and people asked about that, remember how I've shared with you that the English text came in the evening of February 6, 1840. You know, they didn't pull it out till after the fact, after the first lot of signings. You know what? Actually, the English text we had already worked out through our research over 2019 into 2022. We had already worked out that actually everything began with the English text. See? So we're not surprised that the original English text is missing. They cannot find that. But they do provide a translation that is close to that. Okay, from other translations of others from during that time, and then other translations that took place well after the time. You know, or also up into the 70s and 80s, other translations. Well, through our research, as we researched all those translations, we discounted all of them, because none of them came close to the meaning of Te Tiriti. Okay? And this is why we put our translations up on my Ariki page, because that is how they came out. Okay? Sorry, that is how the actual translation into Te Reo came out. That's what it actually says, the way we have translated it. Okay? It's nothing like the original. We can bet your bottom dollar on that. be nothing like the original, and also nothing like any of the other written copies of the English text that were available to us to look at, you know, from around about that time, from 1840 onwards. And we weren't surprised to read in this source that, you know, the original English text was misplaced. I wouldn't mind saying that was misplaced on purpose, because if we had had that, we would see the true comparison between that and how we've translated the real version and what that actually means, what that actually says. Because the reason we've discounted all the other translations is because what the real version says doesn't come close to any of those. Okay? What the real version actually says is exactly what we've put down into the translation. That's why we discounted all the others. Because they don't come close. They don't come close at all. Okay, do you understand that? So they started from an English text. Let me go into that kōrero now, because that's the finish of all that kōrero on the amended statement of claim. So let us just reinforce our understanding of our proof and of some of our proof and our evidence of the fraudulence, you know, a bit more deeper detail on that fraudulence. And around that fraudulence is, in particular, if we think about the English text coming first, see, and that's how they could formulate their real text, okay, of the treaty. So they ended up with 2 copies of, you know, what was supposed to be, you know, very pretentious, very pretentious of them to operate in that way. It was supposed to be, you know, identical translations. But if you look at our translation, you know, we are Aituaa. We're the most senior surviving of Aituaa. The real of TeTiriti is Aituaa. Okay, we translated that in. The understanding that we give you in those 2 translations, firstly the translation of He Whakaputanga, 1835, or the Declaration, and then the translation of TeTiriti, 1840, are exactly what they say in Te Reo. Not what any of the English versions since 1840 that are left to us actually say. Okay? Ours is identical, is far more literal a translation than anything that anyone else has translated, even the literal English text, which was the first document. You know why? We know that because we know quite simply by the standards of the translation. And the standards are such that we can compare the 2 and actually see where they started with their understanding. Where they started was from a Pākehā worldview and a total English text understanding, because most of their translation into the reo is quite a fair bit out, quite a fair bit inaccurate to what they actually have. It's not so specific as it could be. It's not so particular as it could be. Though it is, it attempts to be. It's quite pretentious in terms that it tries to make out that its apparent English text that was available was identical, and that's not true. And that's our argument, you know, that they're not identical. They're not identical, but we're not just talking about the few areas that everyone keeps picking on. The same with this source. The source picks on a few areas that, you know, that didn't seem to be identical. We're talking about the whole of the treaty and the translations. If you compare them, and then you look at our understanding of the Te Awa Reo in that treaty, you will see the comparison that I'm talking about. Okay, absolutely different. And if you've already studied all those 3, then you know already what I'm talking about. Huge distances of understandings, they're overwhelmingly different and variable. Nothing much identical at all. And that's why we discounted all the other translations, because the only identical translation left of Te Tiriti in an English text is our one. And we're not joking about that. We're not joking about that. And that's why you can tell, by rights, if you even that shade of te reo hapu that they used at that time, te reo hapu nui tunu ure tārewa, that they used at that time, that particular shade, if they were very, very fluent at that reo, they should have been able to translate, as well as we did, or even better. I mean, can you get better? We don't think so. We don't think so. But if you can, oh well, good. But by rights, if they were that fluent, they should have been able to translate from the English text to a te reo text, back to an English text, and still come out with the same meaning. See? And they couldn't. They couldn't. It's quite clear to us. And all of that is evidence, e tāma. All that sort of kōrero is evidence. Evidence of the fact that they were out to fraudulate. They were out to fraudulate. They're far too different. And the comparisons of the reo, one way or the other, English way or te reo way, and the comparisons that we've made are far too herereke na wā ke atu. Herereke na wā ke atu. Okay? Part of that was because their comprehension wasn't great. But then, one thing you can tell is that they knew what we would understand. Our tūpuna mātua, I'm referring to. They knew what they would understand and comprehend, and they knew what they wouldn't. Okay? The other thing is they knew in those understandings what they would accept, and they knew what they wouldn't. And that's why the nuance and te kāwanatanga was used. And I've talked about that quite a bit. Te kāwanatanga. Okay, governance specific. Well, when you utilize any linguist would support and reinforce what I say. And when you use a nuance, the literal meaning takes, precedence, belongs to the literal meaning. Any nuance is translated literally. You cannot translate it based on any conundrum, based on any different understanding of any different culture, based on the fact that, and that's fraud. That's fraud to purposely change that, So what they did is they changed it from the English text into a reo text, but utilised the words te kāwanatanga. Why? Because they knew that our tūpuna mātua would accept that. As illiterate as they were, they knew that once they heard those words, te kāwanatanga, ka pai, tēnā hau tā moko hi atu ai, te pukapuka nei, te pukapuka o Waitangi. Ei, te pukapuka teriti o Waitangi, te pukapuka tiriti o Waitangi. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you today. And we had already worked that out. Well, this particular source also tells us the same thing. So you can see a lot of the reinforcing detail that I'm going on about without reading it through to you. One thing about Te Tiriti is, let me look to page 14 of this particular rauimi, this particular source, this particular resource, and read a part of it for you. On page 14 there, it says there was an exchange, the Tiriti 1840, it was an exchange of promises between two sovereign peoples, giving rise to obligations for each party. Under the treaty, this is another, another word or phrase that is utilised big time in here, and that's the word Māori. When you're talking to Tahumaakaakanuimatua about being Māori, that's not something that we are. We are Tahumaakaakanuimatua. We have a Māoritanga, we have a Māoriness. We understand what that is as a concept among our people, and culturally, as we know that what that is consciously. But as a people, karakau. Ko Tahumaakaakanuimatua ke hoki mātau. Te awa ke hoki mātau. Pita tiki roto mō ai hapu. Ko ia tēnā hoki mātau. Okay? So, Māori, all that sort of thing didn't come until 1840, that we were a people called that. We refuse in Tahumaakaakanuimatua to wear that as a term for us. It has it conjures different understandings throughout Pacifica. And for us, it's like a kake, a whakakake. It's like to exalt oneself. So we're not into that. But that phrase is utilised widely here in this book. So, while I'm I roto tēnei puka, tēnei rauimi, so, aroha mai, if you don't like me using that word either from within the text. So, under the treaty, Māori ceded to the British Crown the power to govern in New Zealand, and in exchange the Crown promised to protect their chiefly authority, including their rights to their lands and other possessions. A tāhua tēnā, a koa rā te kupu Māori kairota. E mea ke atu anu? E mea ke atu anu? No. So, no. There isn't any other phrases we should be careful of. Being referred to as Māori, and the whole process does that. So, we've put up with it to a degree. So, and we do put up with it to a degree, and we accept our people. Some of them think that they're Māori. Well, we argue against that. Because we weren't originally. Only in 1840 did that come about. We weren't born in 1840. As a people, we got here over 1,000 years ago. So, kai te ena wā ke ati tēnā. Ana, e hara mātau I te Māori. I roto I ena wā. Okay? So just reading through that, and that, HeAituaa, I said that, beautiful, beauty, you beauty. HeAituaa, katae hoki rā, katae hoki rā. Tērā katoa. Katae hoki rā. And, I'm not that silly. But that totally reinforces a lot of the evidence that we've already brought forward. Okay? And that reinforces that. And this is stuff written by the courts. Okay, if you've got courts supporting, and reinforcing what you're bringing to the courts, that's a great thing. That's a great reinforcement to the whole of the take that you're carrying into the courts, and looking to battle the Crown against the Crown over for the people, for all our people, not just for Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And the reason that reinforces it all is because it totally agrees. It's in favour. It's totally in favour. So that's like evidence reinforcing, and is totally in favour of what we are bringing. Okay, because it does. It outlines originally what the Crown had set out to do. Of course, the reality is that's not what they did. Hey, that's not what they did. They assumed sovereignty. They assumed an authoritarian dictatorship, once things got handed to the New Zealand Crown here. The New Zealand Crown here in the country. And they started to do the opposite. Exact opposite. The exact feudalist way, the uncivil governance way that they operated in those times. This is exactly how they treated us with all of that. Maltreated us, shouldn't I say. Okay? Yeah. So, yeah, there are other parts in it, like in page 14 also. The Crown also provided to extend to Māori the same rights and privileges of British citizens. The treaty is a forward-looking document, and whatever its precise status in domestic and international internationally, domestic and international affairs, it is clear that the Crown saw the acquisition of substantial Māori consent as a political prerequisite to the annexation of New Zealand as British territory. So all of those aims there of Lord Normanby, the way he instructed that of Hobson, even Busby, the way he came into power, our people over that time were absolutely, they were protesting just like how we protest today still. They were protesting in that time, at the time of the appointment of Busby in 1833. And he pointed everyone towards pan-tribalism. Well, that didn't work initially. Pan-tribalism didn't happen initially. They sort of enforced that with the use of the word Māori. So this is why we don't like it. Because it was the Crown that enforced pan-tribalism in this country. And that shouldn't have happened. Because they utilised that to destroy a lot of our traditional mechanisms and structures in our culture. And that's how we lost a lot of that from right throughout the country. See? And this is why we dislike terms like that, the term Māori. And that further reinforces what we're saying. These are the things that they entered into. It all serves the purpose to see the sort of pressure that was on Hobson's shoulders, the sort of pressure that Busby was under, but still they looked to take the country as as British territory. Let's come to the point now where we come into things, and that's well after the I've already talked to you about the actual two texts, the English text and the Reo text, and I've talked to you about the treaty and its power, its particular position in the country. It has, it's a part of a set of documents and customs in the country that form some sort of constitution, a sort of constitution in the country. And that's right too. Its power and one of the things that it does, the chiefs and, the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal have located the core meaning, this is off page 15, of the treaty and the central exchange of lawmaking power for the protecting of chiefly authority. Now that's awesome, eh? That's awesome. At the time of the treaty signing, Māori outnumbered Pākehā settlers by an estimated 40-1. We correct that and we make that about 80 or 90-1. Okay? And the tribes represented a powerful military force in the country. See? You see why we put that down as a bit different? I mean, if there was only 200,000 people in this country, or just a wee bit more, that went over the time of diseases, lawlessness, and musket warfare in this country, we were whittled down to 200,000 real quickly. The simple fact of the matter is that, the New Zealand Crown, the settlers, the Pākehā, would never have held off for 80 years. It would have only taken them about 5 or 10 years. If we were 400,000 in this country, the numbers of settlers that were flooding into the country over times, they would not have held off for that long. They would not have taken their time so much. And during that whole time we were dealing with Westminster. See? There had to be a lot more people in the country, and we believe that we're correct about that because of the numbers of Uretarewa, Hapu Uretarewa in the country. Let's not forget that nowadays there are more in an Uretarewa, there are more in a Hapu Uretarewa in today's terms. Today you might get 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, even 60,000. I haven't heard of any with any more than that. But iwi always had 100, 120,000. Okay? You're not an iwi tūturu if you haven't got that. You're not an iwi tūturu if you haven't got 5 to 8 plus uretarewa. And all those hapu interconnecting from senior to junior. You're not an iwi if you don't understand that the actual slang word iwi comes from that particular structure and formation. And that's because before we even get to the people and counting in the people. Okay? Let me make that clear. And of course, we were a powerful military force in this country, especially if we were that many in this country. If we were 200,000, I don't think the Crown, New Zealand Crown, would have been shaking in their boots at all. And I don't think they would have taken 80 years before they moved in on taking control of this country fraudulently. You know why? Because the likelihood of being attacked and actually being able to repel an attack of that magnitude would have been easy. See? It would have been so easy for them to do if it was 200,000 for real. That's not the case. No, they waited till much later. It wasn't until around 1858 before, and then they didn't attack, wholeheartedly major big areas in the, from throughout the whole of the country. They didn't. The small factions, small groups. Uretarewa, Hapu Uretarewa. That was all that they attacked in the country. Okay? Now, because of that fact, and conjointly, associated with the simple fact that a lot of this kōrero from this rauemi supports what we're saying. You know, the only way for the Crown to acquire an ability to assume sovereignty in this country through the signatures of our tūpuna mātua was fraudulently. And we've proven that just out of our sharing about the English text and Reo text and why it came out the way it did. We don't think they aimed to give it a professional touch in terms of being able to translate it properly or take it from the Reo and back again. You know, that would have been the way that they could check whether in the Reo their translation was exactly the same as what was translated into the English text, what was translated from the English text, and it wasn't. Definitely way different than what it should have been. Okay? And that gives us our, you know, our reading of the poor status of te reo of the New Zealand Crown. They were confident. They were confident. And rightfully so, because they knew our people needed the alliances. They knew the status of play in the country. You know, the US was after the country, the French especially. They were looking to keep them out of the country. Blah, blah, blah. And they already had taken Tahiti. So yeah, I would have been one that would be not so surprised if the French had have attacked and taken over in our country as well, in Te Tiri o Te Moana, Hawaii ki Taung, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, look, yeah, so let me just quickly go through some other very supportive statements about what we're saying, you know, about the fraudulence and the evidence of that that comes from this particular source. I mean, they describe it as a living instrument. Yeah? They describe it as an ongoing partnership. Okay? Yep. We believe that they, the articles do portray that. But what they don't talk about, you know, and we've gone on about that before, is the double meaning of particular phrases. Okay, there's the double meaning. You know, a Pākehā worldview in the double meaning in te reo cannot eventuate, you know, in any careful translation or literal translation or the best form of translation of those kupu. You know, that cannot happen. If it's in the reo, the translation, then in that reo, they have to translate it correctly. And there's lots and lots in the law of contra preferentum that supports that we would be right in saying that actually our findings for this fraudulence and our findings for the way that they treated te reo from throughout the use of this document, the TDT 1840, is fully reinforced by contra preferentum and the laws surrounding that. Like, for instance, even the way contra preferentum has been applied in the United States, same thing. You know, in every way possible, every argument or anything misconstrued, any double meaning, in other words, to any sort of phrase utilized from throughout any of the treaties utilized, the understanding of the indigenous people is taken into account initially. So this is the legal understanding. And so we take it from that, you know, just that alone, you know, but added to all the other evidence that we've got. Yeah, I want to finish this kōrero there because, yeah, there's so much evidence on contra preferentum, with the use of contra preferentum, that absolutely slams the Crown and brings everything back to the understanding driven forward by our findings on Te Tiriti and the particular way in which they used our reo to fraudulate. That's what's clear to us. And those double meanings, when we check that against contra preferentum, the double meanings get singularized, get, they're no longer double meanings, and our native understanding, our indigenous understanding, just because I'm native, but our indigenous understanding of those double meanings takes precedence. Okay? And so they would in any court ruling as well. Obviously, the court would need to rule in our favour. We still don't know which court that might be, but it could be either Supreme Court or International Court. Okay? And that's the highest court in the land, or we might go higher and take it to International Court. Because this is of international interest. Okay? This is something of international interest. These are our tupuna matua that they ripped off in 1840, who were trading right throughout the world from 1816 right up to 1840, and they were looking for more trade and alliances. They were looking for more ideas to branch out their businesses. And we were part of the most successful economy in the world. And I talked to you about civil government. We had that. Because everything like that was being run under the wakaminenga o te runanga ko hui arai. That's where it was all being run. And we were part of the greatest economy in the world. Our tupuna matua were all a part of that. Yeah, so I want to finish it there because, there's so much evidence under the contra preferentum law from right throughout the world. There's a lot of international evidence. There's our own evidence of the lack of use of contra preferentum, where everything supports by law all our findings that we've come up with. Definitely fraud. And if we take away the double meanings of statements like for te kāwanatanga, why they translated it as sovereignty was because they thought that culturally that they could, to tie in with their culture, which had a conundrum, which said, it's sort of the same as sovereignty authority of the Queen, which is kaitehe in our culture. So all those sorts of understandings are wiped out in the process. See? And it just stays with our understanding that te kāwanatanga and the nuance, which is rightful anyway, any nuance in any language is only translated literally according to the nuance. You can't translate that as sovereignty. So the translation that Busby provided in the English later on that evening said sovereignty, which is absolute, that concludes the fraud. And what reinforces that fraud is that only in September of that year, of 1840, September, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, that's about 6 months later, here was Hobson declaring sovereignty over the country. How sad is that? First they fraudulate to assume sovereignty, only 6 months later he, after getting all these signatures, 540 under te reo. So obvious they used our te reo, to get all the signatures. So they needed a remarkable amount of consent, and they got that. But they did that in fraudulent ways. And they utilised double meanings, etc. And a poor ability to translate. They had a very, very poor ability to translate. Okay? So let me leave it there. And play some more. Look, all our prayers and our aroha go out to all those, the survivors and those that have gone on already through the devastation left us by Gabrielle. Also, all our prayers for those in Ukraine still suffering mightily over there, and all those, including our own people, lost in Turkey there as a result of the earthquakes. All our prayers and aroha in Jesus' name. Amen. Ka piti ono ka tātai hono, ko rātau mā tērā te mate kia rātau. E whakaaro nua no mātau kia koutou, tēnā haere. Tēnā haere koutou whakauehe, haere koutou ka tauehe, haere koutou ka muke atu, ki tua o te ārai o te mate. Ka uti atu. Ka piti ona ka tātai hono, o tātou mā tēnea no tātou mā kuan. Te ka anuhi ora kia tātou mā kuan, kai te mihi atu. Tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou. Mauri ora kia tātou kātua. Kahuri.